Hi there, my name is Dan Friedman, and I'm a data center solutions engineer at Cisco. I support national and regional partners in the US, and it's been a while since I've done any kind of presentation on Cisco Nexus Dashboard. I feel like it's a pivotal time in the product's history and life cycle. And so I wanted to kind of do a refresher on Nexus Dashboard and try to get anyone who's not up to speed up to speed. Some of the fundamentals that were posted in earlier videos that I've put up on YouTube still hold true, but a lot is changing. And that's part of the reason I wanted to do this presentation, make sure everybody's up to speed. Lots of roadmap in this presentation. So I'm recording it at this time for distribution to my partners. I will post it at some later, more appropriate time on YouTube. From an agenda perspective, we're going to talk about why we need Nexus Dashboard and what is Nexus Dashboard exactly, what does it consist of. We're going to talk about the product's history because it's a combination of many prior products. It also used to go by the name of Service Engine. Then we'll talk about present day architecture and features. We're going to spend more time on features than architecture. Again, a lot of the prior videos that I posted on YouTube cover the architecture, and a lot of that still holds true. There are some changes, but those are relatively minor. And the features is really what I think we need to be highlighting to our customers in order to get them to adopt the platform. Then we'll go through roadmap, and we'll spend some time there. And then we'll talk through ordering and licensing and provide you additional resources to help get you up to speed. So in terms of why we need Nexus Dashboard, it's because there's a lot of operational complexity and inefficiencies customers consistently face when trying to manage their IT infrastructure. We need to minimize the siloed functionality of our teams and their associated tools and processes. Teams and tools tend to have a unique focus in areas like networking, storage, compute, virtualization, containerization, DevOps, applications, etc. And not only do they have unique tools, but those teams also have unique processes that they follow to configure and troubleshoot devices. And all of this results in inefficient data collection, analysis, and correlation. And those inefficiencies cause a time delay when trying to determine root cause of a problem that's complex. And that delay increases the average time to resolution, which is not the end result that we're looking for. So what we really need is a way to manage all of our network systems that is centralized, scalable, and eases lifecycle management of the infrastructure that we're managing, the tools themselves, and any third-party integrations. What we want to do is ensure maximum uptime, or when we have all we want, excuse me, we want to minimize mean time to resolution. Um, we want to leverage telemetry for predictive analytics so that we can proactively avoid predictable problems. And we want to understand our power consumption. We also want advanced tools coupled with dynamic topology discovery for troubleshooting purposes. And we want to do all of this across multiple fabric types, namely NXOS and ACI, from a single point of administration. And so this, in summary, is why we need Nexus Dashboard. Now, in terms of what is Nexus Dashboard, in short, it's a hosting platform for multiple network operations services. It consists of both hardware, which can be physical or virtual, as well as software, and each service provides its own specific value and functionality based on the types of networks that you run. I tend to divide the functionality of the services into two categories. The first one is provisioning, and the second one is operations. For day zero and day one operations tools, these really focus on the provisioning and management capabilities, whereas the day two operations really focuses on the ongoing visibility and modification of the environment once it's already stood up. All of the services partake in common third-party integrations that are configured at a platform level rather than at an independent service level. Now, to understand where we are today, it's helpful to understand where we've been, and this slide tries to capture that. So on the far left are full product names, followed by their typical abbreviations, their area of application, and the equipment or operating systems that they are focused on. So if I think back to my career to around the 2008 timeframe, I was helping a certain company build a huge data center. At the time, it was based on NXOS and the Nexus 7K switches, which were brand new. And so I was aware of, but never used personally, a product called Fabric Manager. It was used to help manage fiber channel networks, including MDS equipment. That same company were pretty adept at using the CLI for management purposes, but we're also starting to investigate the capabilities of Data Center Network Manager to ease management efforts of their IP networks. Then, if we jump ahead some years, we had several more tools developed for unique purposes. We had the network assurance engine, which was all about ensuring that the intent expressed by the network operator reflected reality while adhering to rules and regulations. We also had Nexus Insights Advisor, which was all about providing advisories such as end of life or end of sale for equipment, field notices such as bug reports, and PCERT information around security vulnerabilities while pinpointing which specific components of the overall environment were being impacted by these things. Nexus Insights Resources was all about reporting anomalies in network behavior. And then we had Nexus Data Broker, which focused on capturing, filtering, and forwarding production network traffic to a set of tools that are used for analysis purposes. And then came ACI and the desire to provide consistent policy across network fabrics in multiple locations while minimizing the fault domains. This was called multi-site. The software delivering that functionality was known by many names over time, including multi-site policy manager, multi-site controller, and multi-site orchestrator. Finally, ACI was and still is today managed by a controller called the APIC. So that is a lot of tools. And this is when our customers told us, hey, listen, we have too many tools. And that really began the movement towards decentralized management platform that today is known as Nexus Dashboard. The point here is to realize that each of the tools currently shown came to exist out of a specific purpose. Some of the tools were homegrown, other of the tools were acquisitions. Regardless, all of them needed to come together. And this is conceptually simple to understand, but there's just a ton of work involved to make that happen. Just consider if each of the underlying tools originated from a different code base or programming language. Uh, and also, a lot of products had to undergo rewrites from being VM based to being container based. And hopefully, that gives you an appreciation for the diversity and purpose of each tool, as well as the underlying complexity that we're attempting to manage with them. So today, the functionality offered by all of these tools have been merged as follows. First, we have Fabric Manager and Data Center Network Manager functionalities merging into what is today known as Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. And there's both a SAN personality for managing fiber channel networks, as well as a LAN personality for managing IP networks of that software. Then Network Assurance Engine, Nexus Insights Advisor, and Nexus Insights Resources all merged into Nexus Dashboard Insights. And then Nexus Data Broker was basically rebranded as Nexus Dashboard Data Broker, and Multi-Site Orchestrator was rebranded as Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator. And the APIC is still the APIC today. Now, here's kind of a visual that shows that going, kind of back here into the 2008 timeframe that I was talking about when my customer was investigating DCNM, along with all of the other products that I mentioned. Now, this green line over here on the right for 2024, I'm recording this just on the 6th of January 2025. So this is applicable for that same time frame as well. That green line essentially represents right where we are today, just before we get to unified Nexus Dashboard, which is going to be version 4.0/4.1, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. But the idea is to take all of these services, Nexus Dashboard Insights, Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator, and Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller, and no longer have separate services. take all of their functionality and merge it into a unified user interface that we're referring to as Unified Nexus Dashboard. So we will no longer talk about independent services, and all of the functionality will be installed by default. I think in version 4.0, you'll have to still enable certain functionality. In version 4.1, I think all of the functionality is enabled by default. This is another visual that basically, they typically say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this is a common depiction that you'll see of Nexus Dashboard. At the bottom, we are showing the nodes needed to run Nexus Dashboard software. Those nodes can be physical or virtual nodes, as well as third-party integrations that happen at a platform level. Um, Above that, we can see all of the services under the Nexus Dashboard umbrella. So we typically refer to these services by their abbreviations. So Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller is known as NDFC and comes in three potential deployment modes that we're going to discuss shortly. Nexus Dashboard Insights is known as NDI. Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator is known as NDO. And Nexus Dashboard Data Broker is known as NDDB. Now, I'm not going to go into as much depth about each of these services as I've done in my prior videos. So if you need more detail, then please go watch those videos. I'll provide a link to them below, but I do want to cover them at a high level. So what is NDFC? It stands for Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller, and it's a combination of two former products, Fabric Manager and Data Center Network Manager. Data Center Network Manager's last software version was version 11.x. When we get into the 12.x code train, that's when Data Center Network Manager was rebranded to Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. In terms of the personalities for deployment, we have one that's called Fabric Discovery, which is basically read-only for your LAN, VXLAN, or IP fabric for media purposes. This handles, basic inventory and reporting, but doesn't allow you to do any kind of configuration. So it's not a personality that is used very frequently, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this disappearing in a future version of Nexus Dashboard. The most commonly used personality is the Fabric Controller personality, which can sort of sound redundant given that the entire software is known as Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. This personality is a read-write personality for LAN, VXLAN, and IP fabric for media, which obviously does all of the topology and inventory information we talked about under the Fabric Discovery personality, but also allows for configuration of your network devices. And then there's also SAN controller personality, which is a read-write personality for managing fiber channel networks. And you can deploy that with or without SAN Insights. So SAN Insights is separate from Nexus Dashboard Insights. SAN Insights is for fiber channel networks. Nexus Dashboard Insights is for IP-based networks. And I thought this was a nice graphic that I'm showing in the lower right because it really speaks to the division of tools that I was talking about. Under provisioning, we have controller and orchestrator. So controller there is referring to Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. Under operations, we have insights. We also have data broker, which is not visualized here. And so from a provisioning perspective, right, that handles your initial setup, your configuration, and automation happens there. And then from an operations standpoint, insights is really going to be the primary point for all of your visibility, troubleshooting, analytics, compliance, etc. So I felt like this was a nice visual that sort of summed up the different purposes of the tools within the Nexus Dashboard suite. Now for NDO, Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator is what that stands for, and it's formerly multi-site orchestrator or some of the other names that I'm showing here on the site or slide. Its purpose is really built around multi-site, and the idea is to allow selective policy deployment across multiple data centers. Now, what that means is that you can have, sorry about that, I had a reminder pop up on my screen while I'm recording. So the idea of multi-site was to have selective policy deployment across multiple data centers. And what that means is From a central point of administration, you may want a policy only to apply to a single data center, but you may also want consistency of that policy across multiple data centers. So both can be achieved with Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator. It also enables layer 2 over layer 3 extension between multiple data centers. So this is leveraging VXLAN technology under the hood, and is similar to what overlay transport virtualization or OTV used to offer on the Nexus 7000 platform. In terms of the fabric types that you can manage with NDO, it's primarily built for ACI, and for a while there, they were building multi-site functionality for NXOS VXLAN EVPN into this product as well. But what we found is that customers were not leveraging NDO to manage multi-site on their VXLAN EVPN deployments. So that functionality now exists within NDFC, and no longer is being supported or exists within NDO. Now, NDI stands for Nexus Dashboard Insights, and this one I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on because NDI has so many features. I really feel strongly that these are the features we really need to be highlighting and pointing out to our customers, because this is where a lot of their pain exists. So, in short, where NDFC and NDO are focused on provisioning, NDI is the daily operations tool that our customers should be leveraging. The product is a combination of several former products, including Network Assurance Engine, Network Insights Resources, Network Insights Advisor, and NDI supports both ACI and NXOS fabrics. Before we dive into NDI capabilities, I want to contextualize our conversation a bit first by trying to understand the difference between monitoring and observability. To me, monitoring is more like a red light, green light status indicator. There may be some metrics provided also, but observability requires far more data collection, analysis, and correlation than monitoring does. So the goal of observability is to deeply understand the configuration and operational state of your systems so that you can quickly root cause issues and reduce mean time to resolution. In that vein, Nexus Dashboard Insights is focused on providing observability for Cisco network fabrics. All right, so with all of that said, Nexus Dashboard Insights has several capabilities. First, as I mentioned, it collects a lot of telemetry data. So hardware telemetry is data about the status and usage of the hardware. And since we're talking about network hardware, this really boils down to metrics around power, thermals, CPU, RAM, and network interface cards. Software telemetry is data about the user consumption or usage of the network. And flow telemetry is data about the actual communications flows occurring across the network. Next, NDI essentially uses AI and machine learning to learn the typical behavior of your network. It comes to understand over time what a normal state looks like, and any deviation from normal is then flagged as an anomaly to the administrator so that he or she can investigate it. So, for example, if there's a sudden and drastic spike in traffic that doesn't normally occur daily, the administrator is notified. Maybe there's a backup job or something like that running in the middle of the day when it's supposed to be scheduled to run at night. So we can raise an anomaly or an alert that the administrator can use to discover this problem and then go reschedule the backup job. Nexus Dashboard Insights also has a full inventory of hardware that comprises the network and the software that those devices are running, etc. As such, Nexus Dashboard Insights provides advisories that are context sensitive to the equipment that you own and run. It's one thing to get a field notice in your inbox, but you always wind up asking yourself, does this field notice apply to my environment? And if so, where are the specific devices in my environment so that I can go fix them? And similarly, it's another thing or one thing to get a security advisory, but you always wind up asking yourself the same question: where does this vulnerability apply so that I can go fix it? In translation, if you have hardware or software that is going end of life or end of sale or has a bug, you want to know about it so that you can proactively address the situation. This ultimately ensures higher levels of uptime and security for your network, and therefore for the business applications running on the network. Nexus Dashboard Insights, since it has absorbed the functionality of NAE, also handles assurance. Assurance is about making sure that the intent of the policies defined by the administrator has been properly implemented and is being properly executed by the network equipment. Essentially, this means, does the intended behavior of the network match the actual behavior of the network? So, for example, in an ACI network, you can configure a subnet under a bridge domain, and the subnet has a checkbox on it called advertise externally. So, the intent of checking this box is to advertise a route for this subnet outside of the ACI fabric, allowing external clients to talk to servers on that subnet. However, unless there's an L3 out configured and bound to the bridge domain, no such route advertisement is possible. It's impossible to advertise routes within the ACI fabric to the outside world without an L3 out. Even if the L3 out construct is configured and exists, if it's not bound to the specific bridge domain containing the subnet that's in question, then the route cannot be advertised. So, in such a case, Nexus Dashboard Insights would discover that the intent, which is to advertise the route externally, does not match the reality and raise a red flag to the administrator to be able to correct this. Nexus Dashboard Insights also handles compliance. Compliance helps administrators establish business policies or rules that the network must adhere to. So another example, another ACI example is when you're working on an ACI network, there's a construct called a VRF, which is a routing table that has a setting called called enforced or unenforced. So by default, a VRF is enforced. And what that means is that all of the contracts, which are related to your security, which are associated to EPGs that are being routed through that VRF routing table, are enforced. All of the contracts and security are enforced. But what if someone comes along and changes that setting to unenforced? Well, in this case, all of the contracts are configured, but they aren't actually doing anything because they're not being enforced or evaluated when traffic ingresses or egresses an EPG that's routed through that routing table. This can have drastic security consequences because the company which runs the ACI network believes that they are more secure than they realistically are. They see all the contracts configured, they expect that they're doing something, but they're really not. In this case, Nexus Dashboard Insights can be used to establish a compliance rule that monitors this setting, and if it's ever changed to unenforced, then the administrator will be alerted so that the problem can be fixed. This also helps with audit, right? In terms of basically what are your standards and are you living up to them? It's easy for us to be able to answer those types of questions. Nexus Dashboard Insights also handles delta analysis. Delta analysis is how you look at what has changed between 2 points in time. This is often the first step in trying to troubleshoot any problem, understanding what's changed since some prior point in time when things were known to be working. It's usually the first question you ask. Nexus Dashboard Insights also handles log collection and connected TAC. Since NDI has a full inventory of all of your devices in your ACI and NXOS fabrics, you can use it to collect logs from those devices and leverage them with connected TAC. This means you don't have to collect or upload any documents by hand, which speeds along the operational process, especially when you're troubleshooting a problem. Nexus Dashboard Insights also handles firmware analysis. At some point, you'll have to make changes to the firmware or software running on your devices. The reason for these changes are often to gain access to features in the newer version of the software or to patch bugs or security vulnerabilities in the older version of the software. A lot of companies don't perform firmware updates on a regular basis for the same reasons they don't change their configurations very much. It's basically a culture of fear. But with firmware analysis, there are a series of pre and post checks that are completed to help ensure that a smooth update will occur and to validate that after the update, all systems are back online and behaving normally. Nexus Dashboard Insights also handles pre change analysis. A lot of companies, again, live in fear, not just of making firmware changes to their environment, but also making configuration changes to their environment. But change is inevitable as new sites open or close, as the company scales, as competitive businesses are acquired, as business applications come online or are shut down, as other services come online or are shut down. Each of these things requires change. So pre-change analysis allows you to propose changes to your network configuration and gain an understanding of whether the proposed changes will produce a desired result without breaking anything else. This allows you to make changes to your network with some degree of comfort that you're not going to solve one problem and at the same time introduce three new ones. Any alerts that are surfaced by Nexus Dashboard Insights can be exported. You can export to Kafka, which allows selective data export to a named topic. A topic is something that you use in a publisher subscriber system so that other systems needing that data can subscribe to it. Data is sent to the topic by the publisher, and then data is pulled from the topic by any subscribers. Data can also be exported to administrators via email. Now, that's a ton of functionality that NXOS and ACI customers can leverage to simplify their daily operations. All right, now what is NDDB? It stands for Nexus Dashboard Data Broker, and it consists of a couple of components. The first one being the controller, which is software based. You deploy it in its own independent VM. And this helps configure packet capture and deep packet inspection. You can kind of see that in the diagram shown here. The controller is shown in the middle under the NDDB network because it's one of the components. And then this orange arrow that comes over here to the production network, which would be our ACI or NXOS based switches, and allows us to configure what's shown down here as production network sources, right? So these are span or tap devices, which allow us to capture traffic off of the production network and send a copy of it to the Nexus Dashboard Data Broker network shown in the middle in green. So we can have one or multiple switches there. They range anywhere, I think, from 1 gig to 400 gig. So, this can be a very scalable network in terms of being able to accommodate the amount of traffic that is ingressing the network from the production network. And this is typically, these devices are typically Nexus 3K, 7K, or 9K devices. Um, and then on the far right, we have a set of management tools, right? So the responsibility of the Nexus Dashboard Data Broker Network devices, based on the programming giving to them by the controller, is to capture, filter, and then forward traffic. It's basically, it's a broker, right? So it receives traffic from the production network and sends traffic to the tools on the right. So, there's multiple types of tools. You've got monitoring tools, you've got IDS or IPS tools, you've got web filtering tools, and so on. So the idea is that you'd be able to take, a single packet, a copy of a single packet from the production network, and then forward that to as many tools on the right as needed. All right. So in terms of Nexus Dashboard as it stands today, you just receive basically a summary of what that all looks like. So if you need more detail, then some of that can be gotten from my prior videos. And of course, I'd always recommend the product documentation. So what has happened with Nexus Dashboard over the last 12 months and where are we headed? This is where we're starting to get into a bit more of the roadmap instead of the historical information. So in March of 2023, the story around Nexus Dashboard was simplified. We want to provide automation to reduce your time for provisioning. We want to provide analytics to correlate your data and reduce your downtime. And we want to provide tools that reduce your mean time to resolution. Then in August of 2023, work began on the new magnetic UI. This is in attempts to simplify and unify the user experience across all of the services, as well as the Cisco ACI APIC. And of course, we want to remove barriers to adoption. So in November of 2023, we changed our licensing. We'll talk more about licensing tiers in a little bit, but previously, customers had to have premier level licensing to have access to any of the NDI features. Now, basic features are available even in the essential license tier, with more features exposed in both the advanced and premier tiers. And then in March of 2024, this year, we added support for standalone NXOS. And I put a big star next to this because this is support for traditional three-tier core distribution and access style network topologies. And that means that there's approximately 650,000 NXOS switches today that don't have a controller, which can be, means they could be brought under the control and visibility of Nexus Dashboard. So this is a huge sales opportunity for us, and I wanted to highlight that to our partners. In July of this year, we added support to send telemetry over the out-of-band management network. Prior to that, we could only do that over an in-band network. So a lot has happened, but we're still kind of just getting started. So now let's dive into more roadmap-centric information. As we begin to talk about roadmap, I want to introduce you to the concept of Nexus One. So what is it exactly? It centers around the idea that customers want consistent outcomes regardless of which fabric type they select. And I've listed some of those desired outcomes near the top of the slide. The trouble with this is that today we have some gaps in the capabilities of NXOS and ACI. So there's an effort that's being made to close those gaps. On the NXOS side, we're building group policy object to function similar to EPGs or ESGs in ACI. This will allow groups of devices to have the same security policies applied to them. Once we can better define our policies in groups they apply to, then it becomes easier to redirect traffic between those groups for things like service insertion purposes, similar to ACI. So this would be, redirecting policy or redirecting traffic to things like firewalls and load balancers. On the ACI side, we're building VXLAN EVPN gateway devices called border gateways, and this will enable connectivity to NXOS and other third-party fabrics. And we're doing this using open standard VXLAN protocol. So I know it's small, but in the diagram part of the slide, you can see our roadmap and when these features are being worked on and expected. All right, so with the capabilities of NXOS and ACI unified, the goal is to achieve interoperability between the two fabric types, enabling layer 2 and layer 3 extension and policy consistency across these disparate fabrics, and to have provisioning and operations for both fabric types handled via Nexus Dashboard, which is depicted in the image on the upper right of the slide. And there is additional improvements and integrations in the works as well, shown on the lower left part of the slide. I'll send you these slides for your reference or make them downloadable via YouTube. So just please, in the meantime, for partners that are receiving this ahead of the YouTube post, just please remember your NDA. So to reiterate, the goal of Nexus Dashboard is to be your one-stop to provision, secure, manage, and analyze all of your NXOS or ACI or even your MDS fabrics globally. All right, here in the middle, we see the Nexus 9K with multiple network types listed below that, ranging from classic Ethernet, three-tier networks to two-tier VXLAN, whether that's on NXOS or ACI, to IP fabric for media, to AI ML fabrics. We will support them all. On the left, we show MDS for your fiber channel or SAN networks. And on the right, we show some extensions that are happening in the campus arena. So this obviously extends beyond the data center. And so I'm not currently clear on how this is going to impact controllers for things like Catalyst or SD-WAN. But if there are questions around this, then feel free to reach out and I'll dig in to find the answers. Um, Yeah, so this sort of shows the before and after, and this is going back in time a little bit because we're currently on version 3.2. Before version 3.1, we had these separate services with different software versions for each of those services and even a different software version at a platform level. And this provided a lot of compatibility checking that needed to happen in the pre-sale cycle. So now we have what's referred to as a unified image, and that's a single ISO or OVA that includes all of the services. And so they all get installed. You don't have to worry about any kind of compatibility between the services or between the services and the platform software versions. And you can upgrade everything all in one shot as well. So this was a major update that was accomplished as of version 3.1. We're currently on version 3.2, headed for 4.0 and 4.1. Okay, and this is an image which basically shows where we're going to go from version 3.2 into version 4.0. All of the features associated with each of the independent services in Nexus Dashboard 3.2 will be installed by default but must be activated. The result will be a unified Nexus Dashboard, a single brand to represent all functionality. The, this will include a two-way integration with the APIC where the GUIs look the same. So a seamless transition from Nexus Dashboard to APIC for a particular ACI fabric will be available. Features associated with NDFC will be available by default. Features associated with Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator must be activated by checking a checkbox for orchestration. Features associated with Nexus Dashboard Insights must be activated by checking a checkbox for telemetry. And all of this happens during Fabric onboarding, depending on the type of fabric that you're adding. Starting in version 4.1, features will not be enabled by checking the checkboxes, but will be enabled based on the license tier that you have purchased. Okay, here's kind of a diagram that shows the main change that I was just referring to. Currently in version 3.1 and 3.2 and prior, we have this um, service selector drop down menu, right, where we can choose Insights or Orchestrator or Fabric Controller. In version 4.0, we'll have no such toggle for individual services. All of the functionalities will be available via the menu items shown here on the left: Home, Manage, Analyze, Admin, etc. Now, in terms of our release timeline, this is the current roadmap. We've just finished up with Q4 calendar year 24, right? So we're just entering this blue space where we were expecting Nexus Dashboard 4.0 for general availability. So I just found out literally this morning, I'm just back from Christmas break and end of year shutdown at Cisco, but just found out this morning that we are not going to have general availability for Nexus Dashboard 4.0 in Q1 calendar year 25 as expected. What we are going to have is limited availability. That's going to be for lab purposes only with select partners and customers. So basically, like I was talking about earlier, Nexus Dashboard is the combination of multiple different products, some of them being VM-based. They have been rewritten into containers. They originated from different code bases, or even were different acquired products, etc. And so there's so much work that needs to go into making all of these things work together, compatible, and operating from a single code base. So basically, the BU has decided to delay general availability until around the summer timeframe of 2025. We don't have anything more specific at that point or at this time. But when we get to general availability, that will actually be Nexus Dashboard 4.1. And one of the benefits of this is that there will be a direct inline upgrade possible, um, going from Nexus Dashboard 3.2 over to Nexus Dashboard 4.1. So hopefully that will ease customers transition over to unified Nexus Dashboard. And for the time being, the recommended version is going to remain Nexus Dashboard 3.2. So now's a great time if you haven't already got your customers onto Nexus Dashboard, or if they're already on Nexus Dashboard, to upgrade or deploy version 3.2 in preparation for moving them to version 4.1 sometime this coming summer. Okay, here you can see the features that are shipping for versions 3.0, 3.1, and 3.2. You can also see some of the features that were committed for version 4.0, which includes provisioning automation and templates for AI ML networks, including best practice configurations for priority flow control and explicit congestion notification in order to make the network lossless for AI workloads. Some of the features are also related to NDFC SAN. This is a good slide that came from an IDC study that I thought, tells a story, right? About, well, it says here percent quicker in terms of intent assurance, time to compliance, change management, visibility, etc. And there's significant increases in operational efficiency according to this independent study. So I thought this was an interesting slide and something worth showing. Now we'll talk a little bit about ordering and licensing. So first of all, Nexus Dashboard is free. When a customer purchases a Nexus switch, they purchase a license to enable features on that switch, and that license also enables management via Nexus Dashboard. So if they've already purchased a switch and a license to run that switch, then they already have everything that they need to run Nexus Dashboard, minus deploying the software on physical or virtual nodes, depending on the size of environment that you're trying to support. So we want to reiterate this message of no Nexus without Nexus Dashboard. It's very similar to, ESXi and vCenter. It's very rare that we see people deploy ESXi without vCenter unless, they're doing it in a lab at home. But if you're doing it in a production environment, there's a lot of features that come along with vCenter like vMotion and DRS that don't exist with ESXi alone, right? And so without Nexus Dashboard, you're not going to wind up with things like Nexus Dashboard insights that increase your visibility, all of the analytics and correlation, helping you reduce your mean time to resolution, ensure your uptime. And you're not going to get a lot of the automation for deployment that's available through tools like NDFC and NDO. All right, I've provided a link here to the ordering guide, but it's really two simple steps, right? First, you need to choose a license per network device, and the license tiers that are available are three. You have DCN Essentials, Advantage, and Premier. Now, I tend to think of DCN Essentials as a single fabric license, and when you purchase this license, it will give you access to NDFC functionality within Nexus Dashboard. I tend to think of Advantage as a multi-fabric or a multi-site license. And as such, it will give you access to Nexus Dashboard Orchestrator functionality within Nexus Dashboard, along with everything else in the Essentials tier. And then I tend to think of Premier as the operations license tier. It gives you full functionality to Nexus Dashboard Insights, along with everything from the Advantage and the Essentials license tiers. Okay, so once you've picked a license tier for your device, then you need to choose your Nexus Dashboard platform. And as I've mentioned, we can deploy this on physical hardware, we can deploy it on virtual hardware. If you're going to deploy on physical hardware, then the SKU you want to use is ND-cluster-L4, and this will allow you to purchase new compute nodes to deploy the software on. Option 2 is ND-virtual equal sign, and this is essentially what you would use from a SKU perspective if you were going to deploy software on top of virtual machines. And then there's also a cloud option that allows you to deploy through AWS or Azure Marketplace. Now, I mentioned, the full features at the Premier licensing tier for NDI, but that's no longer necessary, meaning that if we look at this portion of the diagram I'm currently showing, the Essentials tier is going to give you access to some features of Nexus Dashboard Insights. The Advantage tier is going to give you more access, and the Premier tier is going to give you full access to all of the features of NDI. So, you can still get some access to NDI features with Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller in the Essentials tier, but you get more features in Advantage and again, full features in Premier. Now, there's a breakdown of what that looks like that's shown over here on the right, and it's quite small, so I'll make sure to post that along with the video recording and slide deck. But that basically delineates which features are available at which license tier. And remember that any Advantage license includes the Advantage and Essentials features, and any Premier license includes all of the Essentials, Advantage, and Premier features. So for Nexus Dashboard 4.0, all of the features from NDFC, NDO, and NDI will be installed by default. But remember that, for NDO, we have to check the box for orchestration when we're onboarding a new fabric. And for NDI, we'll have to check the box for telemetry when we're onboarding a new fabric. One of the benefits of Nexus Dashboard 4.0 is that it's going to have unenforced licensing. So this is a good opportunity for customers to be able to use Premier licensing for free. And then enforcement of licensing will begin in Nexus Dashboard 4.1. Now, given the recent announcement that Nexus Dashboard 4.0 will only be available in limited availability to select partners and customers for their labs, not in production, I don't know whether the business unit is going to continue to offer Premier licensing for free when we get to general availability, which will be Nexus Dashboard 4.1. So we'll have to wait and see what they offer there. In Nexus Dashboard 4.1, again, we won't have to activate the orchestration or telemetry features of NDO or NDI. Instead, those features will be activated based on the licensing level. Okay, and then in terms of resources, first, from that same IDC study that I mentioned earlier, I provided some additional business value highlights over on the right. And I've also provided a link to that IDC study shown down here where I'm kind of moving my mouse. But starting at the top, I've provided a number of tools that you'll need for pre-sales and planning purposes, things like the capacity planning tool and the services compatibility matrix until we get to unified Nexus Dashboard. There's also the NDFC compatibility matrix and the verified scalability guides, as well as a separate ordering guide for Nexus Dashboard Data Broker. And then from a training purposes perspective, we have all CAI training opportunities. This includes black belt classes, D-Cloud demos, instructor-led trainings, voice of the engineer sessions with members of our BU, the partner VT. So that link is one that you should definitely bookmark for all Cisco data center training opportunities. The next couple of links, training recordings and partner success on demand, both of those links include recordings from various webinars. I've also included a link here to a session from Cisco Live 2024, which provides a really nice breakdown and even some deployment tips for Nexus Dashboard. I've also provided a link to Nexus One Fabric Experience. So again, this is all about unifying the it's about providing consistent results across both NXOS and ACI. So that's that would be a good resource to look at, along with the independent study performed by IDC that shows the business value of Nexus Dashboard. And then from a documentation perspective, today these provide the links to the four different I would call them documentation sites for each of the four different services that run on Nexus Dashboard. I'm not sure how the documentation is going to change or be updated when we get to unified Nexus Dashboard, so we'll have to wait and see how that comes to fruition. All right, so that's all I had for today. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I appreciate you taking the time to watch it. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to let me know.